All right, welcome back, everyone. So for jurors 16, 17, and 18, and jurors 1 through 6, we're having a technology issue on the monitors in front of you. They're assuring you that they'll be fixed either today or tomorrow. So I've turned my camera so you can see there. The jurors in the back, yours are working. So the 5 alternates in the back there, if you'll for today's just move over, because I don't think juror number 18 is going to be able to see the screen unless, so if you just, in the back row, we'll just scoot down just a hair. Perfect. And then I think you'll be able to see that big monitor better. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Counsel will now give opening statements. Opening statements are not evidence. Opening statements are simply a statement of each party of what they believe the evidence will prove. Opening statements should not be considered by you during your deliberations. You will see on your seat, you have a pad of yellow paper. That is what you will use to take your notes if you choose to. Remember the instructions I gave you about note-taking. You can, you don't have to, it's up to you. But you'll leave it at every break upside down on your seat. You'll leave it at the end of each day upside down in your seat. We will collect those in numerical order, and they'll be returned to your seats the following morning. All right, and with that, Mr. D'Angelo, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Gorman, Mr. Riley, good morning. I guess it's still morning now. Before I begin with my opening statement, I do want to take a quick minute to thank you all very much. On behalf of myself, Mr. LaPrinzi, Sherry Bevan Walsh, the Summit County Prosecutor, for your jury service in this case. You've already spent a ton of time coming in for jury instruction or voir dire. You spent a lot of time this morning going out to the jury view in this case. And I know that each and every one of you understands how important this case is. And I just want to take a minute to say thank you for your jury service. Mr. Gorman in voir dire has spoken about how these are some of the most important weeks of Stanley Ford's life. And I agree with him. They are. But they are also important to the 9 people who lost their lives on April 18th of 2016 and May 17th or 15th, excuse me, of 2017. It's important to them. It's important to their family members. And it's important to our community. And I know that each and every one of you are entering this process wanting to give your very best judgment to the facts of this case. In this opening statement, I'm going to very slowly and deliberately walk you through the evidence in this case. At times, it's going to be complex. It's going to require your concentration. But the good news is that you're going to have this evidence with you. It's going to be presented in court, and you may have it with you when you go back and deliberate. So you're going to have plenty of time to look at it, digest it, and understand it. This opening statement is essentially just a preview of coming attractions, a preview of the evidence. So what happened in this case? Why are we here? 2 questions that each and every one of you are probably asking yourself since you got that notification in the mail that you had to come in for a death penalty case. In the case of State of Ohio versus Stanley Ford. Well, this case began on April 18th of 2016 when a lady by the name of Betty Williams, who lives at 714 Fultz Avenue in the city of Akron, Summit County, Ohio, called 911 to report that the house across the street from hers at 719 Fultz was on fire. You saw an empty field today on your jury view where 719 Fultz stood. 719 Fultz was the home of Linda Lewis and Gloria Hart. You're going to hear the 911 call that Miss Williams made on that morning, or that early morning of April 18th of 2016. You're going to hear that call came in at 3:39 a.m. Now this here is a timeline. You're going to see a lot of timelines in this case. We put them together to hopefully help you digest and understand the information as it comes in. It's going to help put everything in context. You're going to hear that as a result of this fire on April 18th, 2016, that Lindell Lewis and Gloria Jeannie Hart lost their lives. You're going to hear that Mr. Lewis was a retired union bricklayer. He worked there for 30 years. You're going to hear in this case that he was a good friend to many people. You're also going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, that some of his friends were not the best people, not maybe people you would have over for Sunday dinner. They were rough around the edges. But Mr. Lewis, you're going to hear, was a good friend to all of them. Gloria Hart, also known as Jeannie, retired from the Chrysler stamping plant where she worked her entire life. You're going to hear that she spent most of her retired years with her companion Lindell. Now, a lady by the name of Tiffany Gary, who lives down the street, you're going to see lots of maps, lots of timelines. We made lots of stuff for you here to understand. But she lives around the corner. If you remember on your jury view, referencing this map here, when she lives around the corner on what we would call Height Street. As you walked up the hill, there was a street there to your right. She lived down in that area. And on the morning of the fire, she's going to testify in this case, and she's going to tell you that on the morning of the fire, she saw something was going on here at Lindell's house, and she knew Lindell. So she ran up the street. She's going to tell you that when she arrived, she saw Lindell Lewis hanging out of this window here that I have circled in this photograph. And he was yelling out of the window because the house was on fire, it was burning. And you're going to hear Tiffany Gary's going to tell you that he was yelling, "I can't get out. I can't get out." You're going to hear a man by the name of Thomas Hughley also lived at 719 Fultz with Gloria and Lindell. Now, he escaped that morning on April 18th of 2016. He has since passed away. He died in December of 2020. But he did testify in a prior hearing. And you're going to hear that testimony. You're going to hear, through Mr. Hughley's testimony, that once he escaped, he heard Gloria also yelling from a window, "I can't get out." She was screaming, begging for help. Firefighters from the Akron Fire Department responded to the scene. They did their very best to extinguish this fire. And they began an investigation. They called in officials from the Ohio State Fire Marshal's office. And an investigator by the name of Brian Peterman will testify in this case. And he will tell you that he immediately became suspicious of the fire here at 719 Fultz because it started, based on his expertise and knowledge, on the outside of the porch area and worked its way up the side of 719 Fultz. Mr. Peterman will tell you that he and other investigators used a canine that specializes in sniffing for accelerants, and that canine alerted in these areas where the placards are noted, 1 and 2. The canine alerted there. In addition, Investigator Peterman, Detective Tanisha Stewart from the Akron Police Department, and other investigators from the Akron Fire Department learned that Lindell Lewis had placed a camera on the outside of his residence at 719 Fultz. Here's a photograph I put up on the screen. It's showing the cameras. If you'll see here, they're up in the corner. And this camera view right here is shown in this photo right here that I'm showing you, Channel 4. This is 719 Fultz. This is Fultz Street here as I'm pointing to it. And right here is the address of 1370 Hillcrest. Okay, so Hillcrest is running right there. I think you can see a little bit of it in that photograph. In addition, investigators learned Now that video system, I'm going to take a step back. That video system was collected by the Ohio State Fire Marshal and the other investigators. They sent it down to the crime lab at the Ohio State Fire Marshal's office. In addition, investigators learned that Betty and Chester Williams, remember Betty Williams is the 911 caller, her and a man by the name of Chester Williams, her husband, they also had video cameras on their house, which you saw today on your jury view. You stood on their front porch, and you not only saw those cameras, but you were also able to see the view that one of those cameras is going to have from the corner of the porch. So as I stand here and point to this photograph right here, this camera view is that camera you saw in the corner of the porch. And as you can look out, there, right there is 719 Fultz. Today, that's a field. Right there is the address of 1370 Hillcrest. Okay? Just so you have some context of what you're looking at. These cameras right here that I'm showing on this slide are the back cameras that were pointed out to you today on the jury view. This address right here is 1374 Hillcrest, which was also pointed out to you on the jury view. Looking at the map, that's 1374 Hillcrest there, and the back cameras catch that. Video from Mr. Williams, Betty Williams, and Chester Williams video systems were also collected and sent to the Ohio State Fire Marshal's office, where an investigator, actually he's a forensic video analyst by the name of Brad Barkhurst, extracted the badly burned up video from 719 Fultz, that's Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart's house, and also video from 714 Fultz, Chester and Betty Williams' house. And he put them into what we call a narrative and video presentation for your viewing. Now, the first thing you will see when you watch this video is that at 3:13 a.m., an individual is seen walking down Fultz Avenue towards 719 Fultz, Gloria and Lindell's house. Now remember, that 911 call was at 3:39 a.m. This are the slides that you're going to see, that you will see when you watch the video. Now when Mr. Barkhurst testifies from the Ohio State Fire Marshal's office, he's going to testify as to a slideshow presentation that we call the narrative report. Then you're also going to see the video itself. These, in my PowerPoint, are just slides from the narrative presentation. When you watch the video, it's going to become very apparent that someone is walking down the street. He will highlight for you, and you will be able to see someone approaching 719 Fultz. This video is grainy, it's hard to see, you're going to have to pay attention, it's going to require your concentration. But when you watch it, you will very clearly see someone approaching 719 Fultz. When you look at the video from Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart's cameras at 719 Fultz, you will see a man, an individual. You're not going to be able to see this person's face. You're not probably going to be able to tell whether they're a man or a woman. But you're going to see an individual spraying a liquid on the side of 719 Fultz. In this slide, he's holding a bottle of some sort and lighting it on fire. As I indicated, you will not be able to see this person's face, but you will clearly see someone attempt to light 719 on fire. And then when we go back to 714 Fultz, that video camera for Betty and Chester Williams, you'll see the individual run from there. So he's running from the fire that you can sort of see starting there at Gloria and Lindell's house. Now this all happens at 3:15 a.m. Remember, 911 calls at 3:39 a.m. We're calling this the first attempt because as you watch the video, you will see that he was not successful in setting this house on fire during the first attempt. As you watch the video, you will see that there are 3 separate and distinct attempts to light 719 Fultz on fire. Now, the second attempt, that begins at 3:25 a.m. And, as I will show you in this presentation, and you will see in this video, an individual you will see walking on Fultz Avenue toward Lindell and Gloria's house at 719 Fultz. You're also going to see at this point a vehicle turn down Fultz Avenue and stop. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know, you're going to see the lights turn out too, whether this vehicle is involved in this case. We don't know what type of vehicle it is. We don't know who was driving that vehicle. We don't even know if they were involved. I will tell you that if evidence comes to light that they are involved, we will prosecute them. We just don't have that information at this time. But in that second sequence, you will clearly see a vehicle pull down Fultz, stop, and its lights will turn out. And you're also going to see, number 2, as noted here, is an individual walking down Fultz, once again to the side of 719 Fultz. So there is the person right there, and this is the vehicle. Here, the vehicle's lights have turned out. The individual is already on the side of 719 Fultz. When we look at the video from 719 Fultz, you'll once again see an individual holding a bottle in his hand, setting 719 Fultz on fire. This is the second attempt at 3:25 a.m. And then running, as we back to Chester and Betty Williams' house, running away from 719 Fultz. And you will see at the end here, as this individual runs down the street, and it becomes dark. You can't really see from that camera what happens to the individual. But the lights on that vehicle do turn on. Like I said, if that vehicle is involved, and we have evidence of it, we will prosecute them. But we don't have that evidence at this point. Okay. I'm sorry, Judge.
That's right. Sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, opening statements aren't evidence, should not be considered by you during your deliberations. They're simply a preview of what they believe, the attorneys believe the evidence will show. You may proceed, Mr. D'Angelo.
As you continue to examine this video, you're going to see, and that second attempt is at 3:26 a.m. The video will show, as we continue to process this video and watch it, the individual running down the street from 719 Fultz and the vehicle's lights turning on. Now, at 3:33 a.m., some 6 minutes before Betty Williams calls 911, we're once again going to see an individual walking down Fultz towards 719 Fultz, toward Gloria and Lindell's house. Now, in this third and final attempt, ladies and gentlemen, when you watch the video, you are not going to see anything related to this vehicle that turned around Fultz. It's not there in this third and final attempt when you watch the video. Which what you will see is very clear from even Betty and Chester Williams' video, an individual approaching 719 Fultz. And when we watch the video from Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart's house at 719 Fultz, you will see a man, or an individual, in the corner of the porch, right where Investigator Peterman suspected that the fire began, right where you will hear the canine alerted to. You will see an individual lighting 719 Fultz on fire and running from 719 Fultz. This time, you will clearly see that individual running behind 1370 Hillcrest. Some 5 minutes before Betty Williams calls 911. 4 minutes or 5 minutes. It is 5 minutes. After Investigator Peterman, Detective Stewart, the other investigators to this fire saw these videos, saw the video from Gloria in Lindell's house, they realized that they not only had an arsonist, that 719 Fultz was set on fire and that this was arson, but they realized that they had an aggravated murderer on their hands. Detective Stewart from the Akron Police Department will testify in this case that she began interviewing the neighbors there on Fultz and Hillcrest. Started going up and down the street, knocking on doors, speaking with the neighbors. And a common theme that developed from that canvas, from speaking with those witnesses, is that Lindell Lewis did not get along with the man who lived across the street. You'll hear that again, and the witnesses kept saying it. Lindell did not get along with the man across the street who lived at 1370 Hillcrest. Some of those neighbors are going to testify in this case. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, the person who set 719 Fultz on fire ran behind 1370 Hillcrest. Ladies and gentlemen, Detective Stewart's going to testify, and other detectives will testify in this case, that the man who lived across the street at 1370 Hillcrest was the defendant, Stanley Ford, who lived there with his wife, Zenaida, and their 2 young daughters. Tiffany Gary, remember her. She's the one that ran up the street, saw Lindell hanging out of the window. She's going to testify in this case that she knew both Lindell Lewis and the defendant. She's going to testify that at times she would drive down the street and she would see them outside in the street arguing with one another. Miss Gary will tell you that she found this unusual. She knew both of these men were older. And she would often get out of her car and yell at them. She's going to testify, she'd yell at them, "Go back in your house, you two are too old for this. Why are you arguing like this? Go home. It's nonsense." That's what she will testify to. Chester Williams, the man who lives at 714 Fultz, he is unavailable to testify in this case, but he has also testified in a prior hearing. You're going to hear his testimony in this case. You will hear that he was friends with Lindell Lewis, who lived at 719 Fultz. He was friends with him. And he also saw Lindell and the defendant arguing on several occasions. A man by the name of Terrence Sibley is going to testify in this case. Terrence was friends with Lindell Lewis, and Terrence was asked by Lindell to put the cameras on the outside of his house at 719 Fultz. That's what Terrence will tell you. He will tell you that he was directed by Lindell to place those cameras facing 1370 Hillcrest. Mr. Sibley will also tell you that while he was installing those cameras, that the defendant came out of his house and started yelling at him and at Lindell. Beverly Ewing, Rebecca Wright, other neighbors will testify in this case that they spoke with the defendant often, and he would often complain to them about the neighbors, or Lindell and Gloria, but also the people that they had hanging around the house. If you remember, Mr. Lewis had a lot of rowdy friends, a lot of people that were rough around the edges. And you're going to hear that they had loud parties. And the defendant did not like that. He will tell them that. In particular, Rebecca Wright, this is a slide of the house on fire. That's a picture of Stanley Ford's house. But Rebecca Wright will tell you, when she testifies, that the defendant did not like Thomas Hughley. Remember, he's the guy who escaped from the basement. He had a lot of conflicts with Thomas Hughley. As I indicated, Mr. Hughley is now deceased. You're going to hear his testimony. And in that testimony from a prior hearing, you're going to hear a lot of things about him. He's the definition of rough around the edges. He was an alcoholic. He was at times homeless. You're going to hear from other neighbors that he would come knocking on the door, asking to cut their grass. You're going to hear that Mr. Hughley was accused of breaking or attempting to break into the defendant's house. Mr. Hughley is going to deny that accusation, but he will not deny that Gloria, Lindell, and Mr. Hughley did not get along with the defendant, and they had lots of conflicts. Now, after gathering this information, Detective Stewart, Investigator Polk from the Akron Fire Department, Detective Stewart from the Akron Police Department, Investigator Polk, Ellis Polk, is a retired investigator from the Akron Fire Department. He and Detective Stewart went and spoke with the defendant about this incident. And you're going to hear his testimony and Detective Stewart's testimony. You're going to hear that the defendant told Ellis Polk that Lindell Lewis was a vicious guy, that Lindell Lewis had buddies sitting on his front porch drinking alcohol, that Lindell Lewis had prostitutes working out of the house. The defendant told Detective Stewart that the people across the street were bad people. They stole everything. They were bothersome to everybody. They had prostitutes in and out all night and were dealing in homosexuality. That Gloria, Jeannie Hart, gets drunk and does drugs. That the people in 719 Fultz were not his friends because of his standards. And one of the guys wanted to see how long his penis was. Finally, the defendant tells Detective Stewart that Tom Hughley tried to break into his mother's house. Now, these are the statements that the defendant made to Ellis Polk and to Detective Stewart. I'm not trying to take them out of context. Ladies and gentlemen, you will hear those statements. I'm just pointing out things he said. Those statements, as you will see, and the evidence will show, confirm what the neighbors will tell you, that there is an animosity between the defendant and Gloria Hart and Lindell Lewis. Now, at this point in the investigation, Detective Stewart's going to testify that she just didn't feel like she had enough to arrest anyone for this fire. She certainly suspected the defendant. She'll testify that clearly the person who starts the fire runs behind his house. She will testify that clearly she heard that the defendant and Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart did not get along. But she just didn't feel like she had enough to make an arrest. There were a lot of rough characters hanging out there at 719 Fultz. The defendant himself said that he did not get along with Gloria and Lindell. You're going to hear about some of those suspects. Detective Stewart determined at that point in time, though, she did not have enough to arrest anyone, and the case remained open. She kept following the evidence. She didn't get tunnel vision. She didn't make any rash judgments. She kept following the evidence. I've said that twice now. I'm going to say it again. That's what Detective Stewart did, and that's what you all are having to do as jurors in this case. Now, the case remained open, and that all changed in a big way on May 15th of 2017. And why is that? Because at 2:46 a.m. on May 15th of 2017, Zaneta Ford, the defendant's wife, calls 911 to report that a house down the street from hers at 693 Fultz was on fire and it was burning. You saw that house today on your jury view. You're going to hear that the Akron Fire Department responded. They did their best to put the fire out. But the results were unimaginably worse. You're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, that this time 7 people died, including 4 people under the age of 13 years of age, and another person, Jared Boggs, who was 14. 5 children, 4 under the age of 13, all perished in this fire, including Angela Boggs and Dennis Huggins. Angela Boggs, Dennis Huggins, Jared Boggs, Daisha Huggins, Kyle Huggins, Olivia Huggins, Cameron Huggins, and their family dog all died on May 15th, 2017 as a result of this fire. Lieutenant Horner from the Akron Fire Department He's a fireman. He's going to testify in this case about the recovery of this family in this badly damaged house. He's going to testify in this case that Dennis Huggins and Angela Boggs were found together, along with 4 of their children. They were shielding them. The oldest child, Jared Boggs, was found in a stairwell. You're also going to hear that the family dog was with them. They were all together. Once again, Investigator Peterman from the Ohio State Fire Marshal's Office arrived at the scene. And once again, he became very suspicious of this fire. He's going to testify in this case, ladies and gentlemen, that most porch fires are suspicious. But in this case, just like in 2016, the fire started at the outside porch area where a pair of melted garbage cans were located, and it worked its way up the side of 693 Fultz. Once again, Investigator Peterman's suspicions were confirmed when an accelerant detecting canine alerted to that area near those melted garbage cans. This time, Detective Troy Looney was assigned to the case, along with Investigator Peterman and the other investigators. You're going to hear in this case that immediately after this fire had happened, they immediately became suspicious of this man right here. His name's Patrick Boggs. Now, who is Patrick Boggs? Patrick Boggs is the former husband of Angela Boggs, the mother who perished in 693 Fultz. He was a suspect by Detective Looney and the other detectives because at least 12 years prior, he had set Angela Boggs on fire and was convicted in Portage County. He was sentenced to prison for 12 years. Detective Looney, as you will hear, took Patrick Boggs into custody. They did a search of his house, tested his clothing. Detective Looney will tell you that as his investigation developed into Patrick Boggs, as he followed the evidence, he was pointed in a different direction. He's going to tell you about his investigation into Patrick Boggs and how he was able to eliminate him. He simply followed the evidence. What was that evidence? Well, the first thing he did was he went back to 714 Fultz, Betty and Chester Williams' house, and he began to once again look at the video. That video was collected once again and sent to Brad Barkhurst from the Ohio State Fire Marshal's Office, who, as you will see, he will testify again in this case, a second time. He prepared another narrative presentation and video presentation for your viewing. When you watch the video, you will first see an individual, as shown here on this timeline, walking around the front of 1370 Hillcrest. So let me show you what I mean here. Here, from camera 4, from Chester Williams' front porch that you stood here today, you're going to see an individual, when you watch the video, walk around the front of 1370 Hillcrest. Once again, we can't see who this person is or his face, but if you remember, Detective Stewart will tell you that 1370 Hillcrest is the defendant Stanley Ford's house. This became important at this point in the investigation because this was the first time that any investigators had learned the significance of 1374 Hillcrest. Detective Looney and the other investigators will tell you in this case that the defendant also owns 1374 Hillcrest. It was his mother's house. His mother had passed away at this particular juncture. The defendant lived at 1370 Hillcrest, and he used 1374 Hillcrest, as you will see through photographs and the evidence will show, for storage of items. He had a treadmill in there, lawnmowers, lighter fluid, and other items inside of 1374 Hillcrest. You're going to see that 1374 Hillcrest has an alarm system on it. Detective Looney was able to get a search warrant for the company that processes this alarm system. And they're going to testify in this case. They're from a company called Alarm.com. Alarm.com records are going to show that at 1 a.m. on 5/15/2017, some 2 minutes after we saw the person walking around 1370 Hillcrest, that the panel at 1374 Hillcrest was disarmed by Stanley Ford.
Objection.
Sustained.
The alarm.com records will show that when you watch it, or when you see it. In watching the video, you will see, and here we have on our timeline, that the alarm.com records show it was disarmed by Stanley Ford at 1 a.m. At 1:36 a.m., when you watch the video, you're going to see an individual walking on Hillcrest towards Russell Avenue. You walked down down Hillcrest towards Russell Avenue today at your jury view. This is footage from the back of Chester Williams' camera. And like I said, these are just still images. When you watch the video itself, it's going to be very clear that you're going to see someone walking down Hillcrest towards Russell. At 1:41 a.m., when you watch this video, you're going to see an individual runs from the area of 693 Fultz past Betty Williams and Chester Williams' house at 714 Fultz towards 1374 Hillcrest. So running in this direction towards 1374 Hillcrest, as you will see. Here's that footage from Betty and Chester Williams' front porch. Running past there towards 1374 Hillcrest. Then, at 1:48 a.m., after that person runs by at 1:41 a.m., the alarm.com records will show that the panel was armed stay at 1374 Hillcrest. At 1:59 a.m., 1374 Hillcrest, alarm.com records are going to show and tell you when you examine them that the alarm panel was disarmed by Stanley Ford. Then, at 2:12 a.m., you will see an individual, when you watch this video, walk from 1374 Hillcrest past 714 Hillcrest, this time in the direction of 693 Fultz. As he continues to go in that direction, down the street. It's another map that we have prepared for you. Shows it a little bit better. When you see it, I know not everybody can see it here. But down here, 693 Fultz, 714 Fultz, 1370 Hillcrest, 1374 Hillcrest. So in this juncture, at 2:12 a.m., you're going to see someone walk in this direction towards 693 Fultz. Here are the slides from Betty and Chester Williams' cameras. Now, at 2:14 a.m., you will see an individual running by 714 Fultz from the area of 693 Fultz, once again towards 1374 Hillcrest. Here's that footage. At 2:21 a.m., the alarm.com records will tell you that the alarm was marked stay. At 2:27 a.m., the alarm.com records are going to tell you that the panel was disarmed by Stanley Ford. And you're also going to see, when you watch the video from Chester Williams' residence, that a light goes on in the side of 1374 Hillcrest. A light is turned on. Once again, the panel was disarmed at 2:27, and at 2:27 a.m. we noticed this light. At 2:38 a.m., an important sequence begins, some 8 minutes before Zenaida Ford calls 911. Remember, at this point, the alarm.com records will tell you that the panel was disarmed. And you will see an individual walking from 1374 Hillcrest down Fultz towards 693 Fultz. And at 1 minute later, at 2:39 a.m., you will see a flash of light that becomes apparent in the porch of 714 Fultz. When you watch the video, you'll notice this light get brighter. And 1 minute later, at 2:40 a.m., you will see an individual run from 693 Fultz past 714 Fultz toward the area of 1374 Hillcrest once again. And this time, because the neighborhood is lighter, Chester Williams' back cameras are going to pick up several vehicles that are parked in the driveway. And you're going to see this individual walk, as this is the person running by 714 Fultz. And as he gets to the driveway of 1374 Hillcrest, 1370 Hillcrest is right here, you're going to see this individual darken one of the taillights of the vehicle in the driveway. Now, Mr. Barkhurst is going to testify in this case, ladies and gentlemen, that these vehicles are not on, that this is just the infrared nature of the camera that picks up the taillights. But you're clearly going to see a person darken that taillight, and you can see the figure there, and enter 1374 Hillcrest. In the meantime, you're going to see the light on the front porch is starting to get lighter. This is at 2:42 a.m., some 4 minutes before Zenaida Ford calls 911. At 2:43 a.m., ladies and gentlemen, when you watch this video, you will see the side door open to 1374 Hillcrest, and movement is clearly visible. You will watch that on the video, how the side door there at 1374 Hillcrest opens. Next, you will see movement of an individual visible between 1374 and 1370 Hillcrest. The alarm.com records come back into play at this point. And at 2:43 a.m., they will tell you that the alarm system at 1374 Hillcrest was armed stay. Next, when you watch the video from Chester Williams' front porch, you will see the side door of 1374 Hillcrest right here. You will see the side door open. Right here you can see the outlines of the frame of the door of 1374 Hillcrest open from Betty and Chester Williams' camera. It was blown up. You'll see this in the video presentation. Mr. Barkhurst was able to zero in on it. And ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is going to show, and the video is going to show that the side door opens at 1370 Hillcrest, the defendant, Stanley Ford's residence. At the same time, Detective Brian French from the Akron Police Department is going to testify that he was able to download the cell phone of Angela Boggs. Remember, Angela Boggs right now, at this point in time, is inside of 693 Fultz, and it's on fire. And at 2:43 a.m., he's going to tell you that someone attempted to call 911 from her phone. She did this. This person did this twice, and they didn't go through. The calls did not go through. Now, after reviewing this video from 2017, once again, investigator Peterman's suspicions were confirmed, just like in 2016. Not only was he dealing with another arson, but this time he was dealing with 7 counts of aggravated murder. Detective Looney also had his suspicions confirmed. And the significance of 1374 Hillcrest began to emerge. Like I said, in the first investigation, they did not know how 1374 Hillcrest played a role in this, if it did at all. So they went back and they began to review the footage from the fire at Lindell and Gloria's house on April 18th of 2016. they went back and started looking, particularly as you'll see, at those back cameras from Betty and Chester Williams' house. Now remember, this is the timeline that we left off at. First attempt, 3:15 a.m. Second attempt, 3:26 a.m. We got this vehicle pulling down the driveway, or down Fultz and stopping at the end at 3:25 a.m. Our third attempt is at 3:34 a.m. Betty Williams calls 911 at 3:39 a.m. Mr. Barkhurst and Detective Looney will tell you that as they examine the video, and you will see that this timeline starts to fill in. Notably, just like in the 2017 video, as we back up at 2:56 a.m., they're going to notice, once again, those tail lights are darkening in that driveway, just like you saw in 2016. Here's footage from the back camera at Betty and Chester Williams' house. At 2:57 a.m., alarm.com records come into play. This time, they say the alarm panel was disarmed by Stanley Ford, but that's what you will see. At 3:13 a.m., right before the first attempt at 3:15 a.m., once again, when you watch this video, ladies and gentlemen, you will see the taillight darken in the driveway of 1374 Hillcrest. And if you remember, it was soon after that we saw an individual walking down Fultz towards 719 Fultz for that first attempt. At 3:17 a.m., 2 minutes after the first attempt, when you watch the video, you will see that there is movement on the side of 1374 Hillcrest. So as I'm pointing to it over here on the map, you're going to see movement over here on this side, as I point to it, of 1374 Hillcrest. This is the video. Once again, you can't really tell who this person is, but you clearly see movement when you watch that video. At 3:20 a.m., we're going to see a couple of things happen. At 3:20 and 3:21 a.m., when you watch the video from Chester Williams' house, just like in 2017, in 2017, you're going to see the light turn on at 1374 Hillcrest, just like in 2017. You're also going to see, when you saw 1374 Hillcrest today on your jury view, and you will see photographs of it as it was in 2017. But the front door of 1374 Hillcrest is made of glass. The evidence in this case will show that at 3:20 a.m., soon after that light turns off, we will see the front door open to 1374 Hillcrest. Light will reflect off of that glass door. 1 minute later, at 3:21 a.m., once again, a light turns on at 1374 Hillcrest. Now, right before the second attempt, this is the attempt with the vehicle that pulls down the end of Fultz and stops, that we don't know who it is or what their involvement is. You're going to see a tail light once again darken in the driveway of 1374 Hillcrest. Soon after, we're going to see someone walking on Fultz towards 719 Fultz. Tail light darkens, and then it's back. This tail light, remember, it's not on, it's the infrared nature of a tail light. Investigator Barkhurst, Analyst Barkhurst will testify about that. At 3:27 a.m., ladies and gentlemen, when you examine this video, once again, you will see movement, just like you did at 3:17 a.m. on the side of 1374 Hillcrest. This is important. It's 1 minute after the second attempt. At 3:28 a.m., you will see when you watch this video, once again, the front door of 1374 Hillcrest appears to open, and you will see light once again reflecting off of that glass door at 1374 Hillcrest. At 3:33 a.m., 1 minute before that third and final attempt that set Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart's house on fire, you will see a tail light darken again in the driveway of 1374 Hillcrest. Immediately after the fire started, remember that third attempt in 2016, the person at the corner of the porch starts the fire, as you will see in the video, and he runs behind 1370 Hillcrest. You will see when you watch the back camera videos from Betty and Chester Williams' house that a tail light darkens again in the driveway of 1374 Hillcrest. When Detective Looney noticed some of the same activity that was going on in 2017 as was happening in 2016, he began to look at other incidents that had occurred in the neighborhood. He began looking at the alarm.com records, and he noticed that on January 23rd, 2017, there was a car fire down the street at 723 Russell Avenue. You walked down there and looked at the driveway of 723 Russell Avenue. It was down in this area as I point to it. Up here is Betty and Chester Williams' house. Here was 693 Fultz, 719 Fultz. He noticed that there was a car fire there. Back of the car had caught on fire. When Detective Looney examined the alarm.com records, he noticed that Stanley Ford has disarmed the panel at 1374 Hillcrest
Objection.
at 2:01 a.m. I can rephrase that, Judge.
Thank you. Sustained.
The alarm.com records will tell you that at 2:01 a.m., the panel was disarmed by Stanley Ford. It was armed stay, according to those records, at 2:02 a.m. Now, the investigator, or Detective Looney, went and spoke with the person who lived at 723 Fultz, whose car was caught on fire. That person is by the name of Nija Sames. She's going to testify in this case. She's going to tell you that she owned that car. She was told initially that there was an arson, that someone had set that car on fire by fire department personnel. Ms. Sams will tell you that she didn't think anything of it at the time, but after talking to Detective Looney, she remembered that 2 days prior, her son was caught walking through the defendant Stanley Ford's yard. Ms. Sams will testify in this case that after that had occurred, she went outside and she saw the defendant yelling at her son for walking through his yard. The defendant said at that time to her son, she will testify to this, that he would body him. He would body him. Now, after learning this information, Detective Looney and another detective by the name of John Bell from the Akron Police Department, they went and interviewed the defendant Stanley Ford. First thing that he tells Detective Looney and Detective John Bell is that he was asleep at the time of the fire at 693 Fultz. He will clearly say repeatedly, once again, I'm not trying to take these statements out of context. You're going to have them to listen to. But he will repeatedly say that he didn't start the fire and that he was asleep. He tells Detective Looney and Detective Bell that he tries to keep an eye on the neighborhood. That they, meaning the people at 693 Fultz, the second fire in 2017, have a lot of people in and out of the house at 693 Fultz, which to him was scary. They were doing marijuana. The defendant tells Detective Looney and Detective Bell that a neighbor by the name of Paul told him that the boys at 693 Fultz tried to poison the neighbor's dogs. So Paul, the defendant says, that Paul told him that the boys tried to poison one of Paul's dogs. The defendant tells Detective Looney and Detective Bell, I will tell you they were just some bad people, referring to those folks again down at 693 Fultz. Angela Boggs, Dennis Huggins, and their 5 children. Bad people and bad kids lived at 693 Fultz. Kids were kicking vehicles, breaking rearview mirrors, busting them out. I don't know them, but I keep an eye on them, the defendant tells Detective Looney and Detective Bell. I know what's going on in the neighborhood. The defendant tells them that once again he was concerned when his wife called 911 on May 15th of 2017 because they would think he was a suspect. That's what the defendant says. He tells them that the only person in and out of his house was either himself or his wife, Zenaida. He reiterates that he has problems, or had problems, with Tom Hughley. That's the guy from 2016 that you're going to hear a lot about. He tells them, once again, that Lindell Lewis was gay. He used to have gay people up there kissing on each other with prostitutes and shit. This is what the defendant tells Detective Looney and Detective Bell. He later tells them, after he's, as you will see in his interview, is given more information, and he later tells them, I can't give you no good reason why I went down there. I forgot why I went down there. You will see in the interview, and you'll listen to it, that's specifically when they're asking him, why did you walk down Fultz that night? That was his response. I can give you no good reason why I went down there. I forgot why I went down there. If anybody is coming in my side door, then it's me. The evidence in this case is going to show that that's a particularly important statement when you watch the video and you examine the sequence. Light on the front porch, individual running by Chester and Betty Williams' house, an individual darkening the tail light at 1374 Fultz and going inside, then later coming out. And as you will see in the video, once again, the side door of 1370 Hillcrest, the defendant's residence, opening. If anyone's coming in there, it was me. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a very, very difficult case for you all to hear. I think you all understand the importance of it. As I said earlier, I thank you all very much for agreeing to do this. You're going to see photographs in this case, ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. LaPrinzi talked about it in voir dire. We don't mean to gross you out. We don't mean to upset you. These photographs are difficult to look at, and I can only describe them as life diminishing. This case is going to require your concentration. It's going to require you not to get tunnel vision. It's going to require you to once again follow the evidence. In voir dire, Mr. Gorman spoke about how this case was not about an issue of was this an arson or not. That this case was about identity, proving that the defendant, Stanley Ford, is the man that we see in the video. One of the things that Mr. LaPrinzi and I, on behalf of the state of Ohio and the citizens of Summit County, have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the person who started these fires on April 18th of 2016 and May 17th of 2017 was the defendant, Stanley Ford. This case is about identity. The only question is who did it. We accept that responsibility. I encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, to pay close attention to all the evidence that we present. This evidence that we present and more. Pay close attention to it. Challenge it. The defense is not required in any way, shape, or form to present any evidence in this case. If they choose to do so, I'd ask you to pay attention to that too. Consider it. Mr. LaPrinzi and I are not going to be able to explain to you every single thing that happens in this case. For example, the car at the end of Fultz. But our burden is not that, to explain everything that happened. It's to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt the elements of the offenses and that the defendant is the one that committed them. The good news about all of this, even in this most difficult of case that you're about to consider, is it doesn't require any specialized skill on behalf of you as jurors. All we need is you to come in, listen, pay attention, follow the evidence, and use your reason and common sense. Don't leave it in the car. Bring it with you in here. Use your reason and common sense. To summarize, there are 4 key areas of evidence in this case. First, the defendant's motive will be shown through the evidence in this case through the neighbors, and then later confirmed by him, about his animosity towards his neighbors at 719 Fultz and 693 Fultz and at 723 Russell Avenue. Second, the video evidence from Lindell and Gloria Hart's house at 719 Fultz. That's the second big piece of evidence in this case. Obviously, the video from Betty and Chester Williams' house at 714 Fultz. Third, the alarm.com records at Stanley Ford's mother's house at 1374 Hillcrest are another piece of evidence that add to this timeline and that timeline of events. That timeline, his statements, and the similarities of his actions show his opportunity, and ladies and gentlemen, the evidence, all of that will reveal his identity. And that will show you that when the defendant gets angry with his neighbors, he sets their property on fire and he kills them. And at the conclusion of this case, Mr. LaPrinzi and I are going to ask you to find the defendant guilty of all the charges and all of the specifications. I thank you all very much for your service, your jury service, and listening to me here today in my opening statement. And regardless of your verdict, I say thank you. Judge, I have nothing else.
Thank you, Mr. D'Angelo. Mr. Riley, may you proceed?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Scott, do you need this? Or?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I'm going to present.
Okay.
May I please report, counsel, Stanley Ford. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Riley. You know that. We've talked at length. Prosecutor laid out a very emotional case, and he said thank you for your service. We do thank you. But we all understand that this is an emotional process. Mr. Gorman talked to you in voir dire a little bit about treating this as an academic exercise, because in order for a fair trial to occur, you have to do it without emotion. And it's hard to do. It's almost inhuman to do, based on the fact that there are 9 deaths as a result of this indictment. All right? But you have to treat this as an academic exercise without emotion in order for a fair trial to occur. You're going to hear about the investigations done in this matter. You're going to hear from the State Fire Marshal. You're going to hear from the Akron Fire Department. You're going to hear from the Akron Police Department. A lot of the evidence that you're going to be presented to is not a dispute. It's not a dispute that there were 3 fires set. It's not a dispute that all 3 fires were set intentionally. And it certainly is not a dispute that there were 9 deaths. The coroner, the medical examiner is going to come in, talk to you about the homicides that she ruled, and then the cause and the manner of all 9 of those deaths. Those facts are not in dispute. But again, as defense, we've told you, and you know that the state of Ohio has the burden of proof to prove each and every element. Defense has the burden to prove nothing. But what we will do through the course of this trial is point things out in the investigation which raise that reasonable doubt. You're going to hear about the investigation from Detective Stewart. You're going to hear about the investigations from Detective Looney. We will cross-examine them, and we will point out some of the other suspects, other viable suspects, not Stanley Ford, but other folks in the neighborhood. (719) Fultz was the home of Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart. And when I say that there, a lot of these facts are not in dispute, clearly all these deaths are tragedies. And you will never hear anybody from this side of the table for the defense say anything other than that. We understand that, all right? But still, we have to look at the investigation carefully and critically. Your jobs as jurors in listening to the testimony, listening to the witnesses, is to determine credibility, right? Determine what is credible. You also have to look at the investigation totally and look at that and determine whether it's credible, all right? What we're going to find out, Mr. D'Angelo talked about, in a sense he's called the folks that would come over to Lindell Lewis's house as being rough around the edges, all right? I think what the evidence is going to show is that there is history of drug use, there is history of drug abuse, there is history of folks at that house not paying their dealers for their drugs, and you're going to hear about the conflicts that occur in that house, and you're going to hear about another instance of arson, separate and unrelated to what's being alleged here in the state of Ohio versus Stanley Ford. There's a history of people owing money, and that creates a list of other suspects with well-known motivations, conflicts, and deception. You're going to hear about a man, I think, named Ronald Garrett. Ronald Garrett also at one point in time lived in the basement of Lindell Lewis's house, in addition to Mr. Hughley. And you're going to hear about shortly that he wasn't there the night of the fire, but you're going to hear about Detective Stewart's investigation to him. And I believe you're going to hear Detective Stewart say when she interviewed him, she found him to be evasive, not forthright, inconsistent, vague, and very elusive. In the course of her investigation, you're also going to find Detective Stewart issued subpoenas, obtained documents, and what she did find through the course of her documents was that Lindell Lewis had a life insurance policy. But the beneficiary of that life insurance policy was Lindell's ex-wife, Francine. Detective Stewart then followed up on that information and went out to interview Francine. And she also interviewed her then boyfriend, William Pryor. You heard about the videos, and Detective Stewart at this point in time has seen all these videos. And I think what the evidence is going to show was she went out to talk to Ms. Lewis and Mr. Pryor about this life insurance policy, that William Pryor drove a vehicle that she thought was similar to the one that she saw in the video. That William Pryor fit the general description of the person that she saw in the video. Talk about 693 Fultz. The prosecutor talked to you about Patrick Boggs. Patrick Boggs, again, 12 years before that fire, had been sent to prison for lighting Angela Boggs on fire. He had just been released. He was arrested that evening. And you're going to hear, through cross-examination, all the things that the police department did and didn't do as it relates to their investigation of Patrick Boggs. The videos are grainy at best. Not a single witness is going to come in here and tell you that they've looked at those videos and they've identified from those videos Stanley Ford. You're going to hear about all of the things that they did to try to enhance those videos. I believe they even sent them off to the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. But yet and still, not a single witness is going to come in and talk to you and tell you that that image that they see, they can tell is Stanley Ford. The prosecutor laid out alarm.com. And the records, they say, says that the alarm was shut off by Stanley Ford. You will not hear a single witness from alarm.com tell you that they, number one, even know who Stanley Ford is. That they know that Stanley Ford did anything, let alone turn on or turn off an alarm. I believe the person that's going to testify from alarm.com is going to do it from the state of Minnesota. Probably has never been to the state of Ohio, and certainly doesn't know Stanley Ford from Akron. Stanley Ford has entered a plea of not guilty of these charges. We told you about that in voir dire. He has said through his not guilty plea, I did not do this. The state has the burden of proof to prove to you with the type of evidence that you would use in the most important of your own affairs. You have to keep an open mind and listen to the entire presentation. You cannot rush to any determinations as to what happened until you've heard all of the evidence. All right? Prosecutor laid out 4 things that he said were the key. Number 1, motive. Number 2, the video. Number 3, alarm.com. All will reveal his ID. Alarm.com can't tell you Stanley Ford did anything. The videos cannot tell you Stanley Ford did anything. Motive is not an element. I think the judge might even tell you that. Motive is not an element in these particular crimes, or any crime in the state of Ohio. Hold the state to that burden of proof. And talk about 1370. You were out at that scene. Pay attention to 730 Fultz, which is right next to 1370 Hillcrest, in the area behind that house. You saw it today when you were on your jury view. All right? Take in everything carefully and critically. Do not rush to conclusions, the same conclusions that the police department rushed to. All right? Judge it carefully, critically, and when you do that, you'll know they have not proven Stanley Ford's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So as I indicated to you earlier, we're going to adjourn for today, and we will start bright and early tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I want to remind you of the admonition I've previously given you concerning your conduct. It's important for you to be fair and attentive throughout the trial. Do not discuss a case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. This includes family, friends, and the media. You must not post or read anything about this case on the internet or any electronic device, including your cell phone. Do not watch any news accounts of this and or watch any type of reenactment or replay of anything you've heard in the courtroom today. Any such discussion, if discovered, could lead to a mistrial, which would severely compromise the parties' rights to a fair trial. Do not permit anyone to discuss this case with you or in your presence, and do not form or express an opinion on this case until it has finally been submitted to you. And so as you can see, this courtroom, compared to Friday, is a little different. It's a little muggy in here. So again, dress appropriately in layers if you choose to, and you'll have access to the jury room. There's a refrigerator in there if you want to bring your lunch. Tomorrow we'll be here all day. You can, of course, leave the courthouse during your lunch break. You can go downstairs to our cafeteria there, but you can also bring anything you want. So with that, we're going to adjourn for this morning and have you come back and be in the courtroom or in your jury room tomorrow by 8:45. We'll start at 9. And then juror number 13, I'm going to ask that you stay for a couple minutes. We want to talk about your schedule. All right. We're adjourned.
All rise with your notepads face down on your chairs. Please remain in the jury room, and I'll get your electronic devices for you.